Dr. Patty Fletcher, author of Disruptors, Success Strategies from Women Who Break the Mold. I am a firm believer that women don't need to lean in more, right? What happens when we lean in more? Our faces hit the freaking ground, right? We don't want to do that anymore, right? So what we do want to do is find out what the challenges are and then how we solve them. And the two ways not to solve them are to blame and shame men and to try to fix women or any other represented population. So the book is about what are those systemic biases that are in decision making, that are in the structure when it comes to harnessing all the best and available talent. And then examples from people who are not part of the 1%, right? People like all of us, including Brenda Reed, who's here on the panel. She comes from an HR tech perspective. So just know that that's where we're coming from here. We're not trying to finger point at the men who are trying to, hunt us down. It's so interesting. I've yet to meet a man who wakes up in the morning and wonders who he's going to impress that day, right? Just like I have yet to meet a woman who isn't focused on the business goals that she has in front of her and instead wondering who's going to impress her. That's not the world we live in. But what we do know is that we have a problem, right? There's a problem with you speaking on a stage and then after that having people undermine you simply because of data points that you were born with that don't quite matter when it comes to your ability to do a job. Or you being able to have your pay guaranteed to be equal to the person next to you, whether it's a male or female, or your career trajectory supported in the same way, right? Those are systemic challenges. And the truth of the matter is that I've been on this topic of equity in the workplace for a really long time. I grew up in HR, and over the last 20 years, I've seen HR be the biggest stumbling block. They did not want to invest in this. I was brought in by line of business leaders. They just didn't like this topic, and there are multiple reasons why. We're seeing a tide change. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow morning on the keynote stage about what is going on with HR. So it should be interesting. It's always wonderful to talk to a topic that the audience probably knows more about than you do. So that will be interesting. So for today, let's kick off Women in Tech. And I will say, and I don't know your experience, I get a lot of, are we still talking about that? Didn't we solve that already? Based on the fact that you tend to be the only woman on the stage, or you had to leave a company because what you brought to the table was just not good enough and you had to keep proving yourself over and over again, I'd say probably not, right? Because they're systemic. They're unconscious biases that are built into a system that's over 100. Let's start with the state of the state. The first question, and Charlotte, if it's okay, we're going to start with you. What are the conversations you're part of when it comes to the acquisition piece, attracting top female talent in technology type of roles? What's being done differently than what's been done before? And what are you seeing in terms of making the clear connection between what we say our brand experience is? Because you guys know, just as I do, that every CEO gets on stage and talks about how amazing and inclusive their brands are, but then you have a completely different experience. Or you go through the talent acquisition application thing and everything's all sunshine and fairy tales, and then once onboarding starts, nobody's been trained on doing things differently in an inclusive manner. So talk to us a little bit about what's going on with the acquisition piece and then how you're seeing it translate from a brand experience overall.
The most exciting thing I'm seeing in the industry as a whole right now is, for the first time in my career, I'm seeing the perceived value of talent attraction is finally aligning with the CEO's priorities where I work and just how important it is for business to grow and scale. So I'm seeing more investment, more excitement, more appetite to do more acquisition strategies. And then the conversation has gone from this universal appeal to very segmented campaigns to bring in certain talent segments, or personas as we call them. And the conversation around women in particular, I think, is really important because this conversation is one where very few organizations feel like they are there yet. And they don't have a great story to tell to attract the talent that they need. So what I've learned from the last 5 brands I've helped build and develop is that most of us spend way too much time, way too much money, and we come up with a value proposition that's only 50% complete. The old way of doing employer branding was really based on celebrating the strengths and the opportunities and the benefits of joining our organization, period. And that's advertising last time I checked. That's probably the reason Glassdoor was sold for $1 billion and why candidates are going to other sources to try to find the truth of what it's like to work at our organizations. So what I try to coach organizations on is creating a more transparent value exchange We're very clearly articulating our expectations of you and what you can expect from us in return so that we're telling a complete story. And when it comes to women in tech, I have yet to meet somebody that will turn away from an opportunity when you're transparent and vulnerable enough to say, hey, we're not there yet. This is an aspirational goal. Here's where we're going. And let's be honest, we have a really long way to go, but will you help us get there? And when there's that level of trust and vulnerability, you see much more affinity coming into the organization.
Yeah, for sure. Jill, any comments on that?
No, I mean, I would totally agree with what you're commenting on. I also think that from an attraction perspective, there's a lot more discussion now around diverse slates. So whether leaders really want to do it or not, there's a lot more pressure in the system. And I think that's a really positive thing. And so my belief is that the more diverse slates you have, the more diverse candidates, if you hire the best candidate, all the boats sort of rise. Mm-hmm. And so I really think if we can keep moving in that direction, we'll start to make some impact.
For sure. And Brenda, so Brenda grew up in onboarding from the technology world. And so we hire job boards, right? And our job boards tend to give us basically a meritocracy, right? Because they're giving people who look like us, think like us, and will say things like, sorry, I tried to find people who are fitting according to your standards that you have, 50% of the candidates have to look like this underrepresented population. Any comments around job boards or expectations from a technology perspective?
Well, I think we're doing a much better job in technology now with helping eliminate the bias out of job descriptions and using technology to make sure that we're attracting the right talent through elimination of those things that may have inadvertently been chasing them away. Mm-hmm. Nobody writes a job description. Well, few people do, but most people don't write a job description in a way that's intended to chase the applicants away. So I think that we're doing a much better job now with the use of technology and with the use of some of this predictive data language in making sure that we eliminate the bias out of those.
And it only becomes more important. We all know, right, that our workforce demographics have changed, not just with women, but what is it, like 67% of the population over the next few years are self-describing as being part of the gig economy, right? You're literally going to be fighting for talent in ways we've never had to fight with before. And so the words we use and also the experience within the organization is critical. Right? You wave a carrot to get someone in, but then what happens when they're in there? And so, Jill, let's talk about that. There's so much legal stuff here, so much technology stuff, which Brenda, we're going to talk about, so much HR stuff, and we know HR has a reputation, right, for being the steward of the corporate versus the one of the people. So when it comes to things like compensation or reward, who makes that decision in supporting career trajectories? Is it HR? Is it finance? Is it legal? Is it a combination? Like, how do we actually do something different? Because that's the problem. We say the right things, but we don't actually change the how and what.
Right. So I think it's everyone's responsibility. I do think it starts with the CEO. And I know that's hard to hear, but the reality is HR can do a lot of different things, but if accountability isn't held at the top of leaders, then you're just screaming in the wind, basically. And so I think there's a lot of ways that HR can have an impact, even in organizations that maybe aren't as forward-thinking at the top. But it does start with the CEO. And I think as far as thinking through, ways that we can deal with pay parity and some of the things that we've talked about, the reality is it has to really be embedded in the policies of what you do. And so, some of the things that we're talking about at Metadata, just to give you some examples, is we're looking at things like maternity leave, paternity leave, any sort of real medical leave, and what is that experience? And so we're actually have very, very generous, like 6 months, almost 100% pay. So we just take it off the table as far as being worried about your bills and your job and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But then the other thing that I do think HR teams could do is when you bring those folks back into the workforce, stop perpetuating pay parity issues. So you prorate the merit, you don't pay the bonus, they miss an equity cycle, don't do that. Mm-hmm. And so we made a distinct decision with our CEO not to do that. The other thing that we're looking at is women on boards. And so, we decided to bring a woman on our board who had no prior board experience. And that's really important if you're going to start to access different types of pools.
That's amazing. So first of all, that HR was even involved in a board decision for a public company is crazy. For private companies, it's crazy. So that's amazing. The second thing, Jill, that I love that you said is she didn't have board experience. So my PhD dissertation was on women who held board of director positions in publicly held life sciences and technology businesses. And at the time, there were like 15 of them, right? In tech, it really hasn't changed. Life sciences has gotten better. And what's been so clear, these women who were on these boards, they were CEOs, they had CFOs, most of them at the time, because Sarbanes-Oxley was a big thing, they were CFOs. They had board experience, and yet they were told to go take the director class at Stanford. But their male peers were not. And so what we know to be true, and what we have to remember in HR, is that we have a bias of hiring women for experience and men for potential. So the fact that you brought her on based on potential is huge, which then creates a challenge around when a woman doesn't know something, she takes that class at Stanford. When a man doesn't know something, he takes the job, because that's the expectation. And we see us conditioned at a very early age, right? Perfection with women, tinkering and trying with young boys, right? So we see that, and that's incredible. It's actually so used to seeing only women. And we have men here. And what I have learned is that this is not about men versus women. This is about expectations, about different working styles. We all have male traits and female traits. I'm probably more alpha male than I am female in how I act. No comment from you. Right? So this is about all of us belonging. The truth is, most of us don't see ourselves in the organizations in which we work. And from an HR perspective, it is awesome, because I believe why you're here is, what are the challenges and what can we do? Because we are not doing a great job when it comes to harnessing all the best and available talent. And that's what this is about. So thank you all so much. Again, I'm available for questions via email, patty@pattyfletcher.com, and also all over social. So just reach out to me and I will help in any way that I can. And thank you to our panel. You guys were amazing. Thank you.